My body would jolt awake, searching for the sounds that usually signaled morning, traffic, sirens, the hum of the city starting its day. Instead, birds, wind, silence. I'd look for things to do and realize there was nothing demanding my immediate attention. No meetings scheduled back to back, no constant notifications, no sense that I was falling behind if I spent an hour just sitting. At first, the quiet felt uncomfortable, almost accusatory. I was so used to noise, to stimulus, to constant input that silence felt like absence, like something was missing. My mind would race to fill the space, generating problems to solve, things to worry about, tasks to complete, but slowly over weeks, I realized it wasn't absence. It was space. Space to think without interruption, to feel without distraction, to simply be without performing or producing or proving anything to anyone. I started noticing things I'd forgotten existed. The way morning light looks coming through trees, different every day depending on the season and weather, the sound of wind through leaves, not white noise, but actual distinct sounds, the feeling of walking without a destination, just walking because it feels good to move your body. Through space, I began sleeping differently within the first month, really sleeping deeply, without the city hum I didn't know was keeping me in perpetual light sleep. I'd wake up feeling rested in a way I hadn't felt in years, maybe decades. My dreams became more vivid, more memorable. My mind had space to process and integrate in ways it couldn't when constantly stimulated. The people in this town treated me like anyone else, which was the greatest gift they could have given me. They didn't care about my work or my accomplishments or my public persona. They cared about whether I was a good neighbor, whether I'd helped someone whose car broke down, whether I showed up to community events, whether I was kind to the person serving me coffee. It was humbling and refreshing. I was just another person in a small community, not a figure to be impressed by or criticized or analyzed or photographed or quoted, just a person. I found myself having conversations I hadn't had in years. Real conversations, not networking or transactional exchanges. I'd talk to the man at the hardware store about weather patterns and gardening, and he'd share knowledge passed down from his grandfather. I'd have coffee at the local diner where everyone knows everyone, where conversations flow from table to table where nobody's in a hurry to finish and move on. I started sitting on my porch in the evening, just watching the day end, something I'd never had time or space for in the city. Watching the light change, the colors shift, darkness gradually settling in, not doing anything, not optimizing anything, not producing anything, just existing in a moment. The biggest change was internal in ways I hadn't anticipated. The constant pressure I'd carried for years to be productive, to be relevant, to be achieving, to be seen, just dissolved. Out here, nobody cared about those things. They cared about simpler, deeper measures. Are you kind? Are you honest? Are you helpful? Do you treat people with respect? I realized now that I'd been living in a pressure cooker of my own making, amplified by the city environment. The city magnified every ambition, every anxiety, every need to prove something, every fear of falling behind. Out here, those pressures seem distant and fundamentally unimportant. The work I do hasn't stopped, but it's different. Now, I work from a place of genuine interest rather than driven urgency. I have space between problems, space to think deeply rather than react quickly. The constant low-level anxiety that colored every decision in the city, it's just gone. Here's what I learned from this experience and why I'm sharing it with you. Many people, especially as they get older, stay in environments that no longer serve them. Well, simply because those environments once made sense. The city made sense when you were building a career, when you needed to be where opportunities were, when the energy and pace matched your internal drive, but needs change. What serves you at 30 might drain you at 60, and there's no shame in acknowledging that. I have talked to people in their 60s and 70s who are spending their later years in cities because that ease where they have always been. They rarely use the restaurants anymore. They don't go to the theater. The museums they once loved now feel exhausting because of the crowds. They find the noise irritating rather than energizing, the pace exhausting rather than exciting. But they stay because they think leaving means giving up, admitting defeat, becoming irrelevant, disappearing from the world that matters. I want to tell you, it's not defeat, it's evolution. It's recognizing that what you needed at one stage isn't what you need at another. You are never too old to choose an environment that actually nourishes you rather than one that constantly demands from you. Some of you watching this might be in the same situation I was, living in places that exhaust you more than they energize you, surrounded by noise and people, but feeling profoundly alone, maintaining a lifestyle that looks successful from the outside, but feels increasingly empty from the inside. If that's you, I want you to consider something. What would your life look like if you lived somewhere that matched your internal pace rather than demanding you keep up with an external one? Not where you think you should be based on your career or past achievements. Not where your success or status suggests you should be. Where do you actually want to wake up every morning? What environment would let you feel most like yourself? For me, the move wasn't about escaping responsibilities or avoiding challenges. It was about finally giving myself permission to choose peace over prestige, quiet over constant stimulation, simplicity over the complexity that comes with urban status. I know it seems impossible, especially if you've built an entire identity around urban success, around being at the center of things, around being accessible and visible. But I've learned that the fear of irrelevance is often just pride in disguise. And pride is a poor trade for peace. The people who truly matter in your life will understand. They'll see that you're happier, calmer, more authentically yourself. They'll notice that your presence has deepened, even if your accessibility has changed. And if they don't understand, maybe they weren't as important to your well-being as you thought. I'm not saying everyone should move to a small town. Some people genuinely thrive in cities, draw energy from crowds, need the stimulation and opportunities that urban environments provide, and that's perfect for them. But if you're staying in an environment out of habit or image rather than genuine fit, maybe it's time to at least consider what else is possible, to ask yourself honestly, am I here because this serves me or because I'm afraid of what leaving might mean? Your later years should be lived on your terms, not according to some script about where successful people are supposed to be or what your life should look like. Maybe that means staying exactly where you are, and that's fine. Or maybe, like me, it means finding a place where you can finally hear yourself think, where the external demands quiet enough that you can hear your internal voice again. I want to address something directly. Some of you might be thinking easy for him to say he has the resources to make any choice he wants. I made a decision last year that surprised everyone who knew me. I quietly moved to a small rural town, and the reasons why might resonate with many of you more than you'd expect. Leave a comment saying move if you want to hear why sometimes the biggest changes in life come from the simplest realizations. For over 20 years, I lived in cities, big cities with everything at my fingertips. Restaurants, entertainment, connections, opportunities. I knew the streets, the people, the rhythm of urban life. My work was there, my routines were established, everything was familiar, but something had been shifting inside me for years. So gradually, I barely noticed it. I'd wake up in the morning and feel disconnected, surrounded by millions of people, but feeling alone. Successful by every measure that's supposed to matter, but empty in ways I couldn't quite name. The city noise never stopped. Sirens, traffic, construction, conversations, bleeding through walls. I'd gotten so used to it that I thought I didn't notice anymore, but my body noticed. My mind noticed. I was never truly at rest, never in a state where I could hear my own thoughts clearly. I started paying attention to how I felt throughout the day. In meetings, I felt engaged with problems, but disconnected from people. In restaurants, I felt surrounded by activity, but isolated in the crowd. Walking down busy streets, I felt the energy of the city, but none of it touched me in any meaningful way. The breaking point came on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was in a meeting room on the 40th floor, looking out at the city sprawl below, millions of people rushing, striving, competing, buildings stacked on buildings, cars filling every street, humanity pressed together in concentrated intensity. And I thought, what am I doing this for? It wasn't about the work. The work itself was fine, even fulfilling at times. It was about the environment, the constant stimulation, the endless demands for attention, the feeling that every moment needed to be productive or optimized or meaningful in some grand way. I realized I'd been living in a state of perpetual readiness. Ready for the next meeting, the next problem, the next opportunity, but never just present, never just being, never at ease. That night, I sat in my apartment, expensive, modern, perfectly located in the heart of everything, and realized I felt nothing for it. It was a place to sleep, not a home. The city around me was a place to work, not a place to live. And I'd confused having access to everything with having what I actually needed. I started asking myself different questions. Not where should I be to maximize opportunities, but where do I want to wake up every morning? Where would I feel at peace? Where would I feel like myself? The answer surprised me. Somewhere quiet, somewhere simple, somewhere I could see stars at night and hear actual silence, somewhere I could walk outside and not immediately be in performance mode, managing how I'm perceived and what I'm projecting. I began researching small towns and rural areas, not as a fantasy or escape plan, but seriously considering what it would mean to completely change my environment. I looked at places with populations under 10,000, places where the main street was a few blocks long, places where everyone knew everyone.
I'm stuck where I am. That's partially true. Resources provide options, but what surprised me was that the hardest part of the move had nothing to do with money or logistics. The hardest part was the internal work, letting go of identity. Admitting what I'd been doing wasn't working, choosing something that looks like less in order to have something that feels like more. That internal work, confronting your own attachments, facing your fears about relevance and meaning, questioning assumptions you've built your life around, that's the same for everyone, regardless of circumstances. Money can't make that easier. And here's something I've discovered. Moving to a simpler place often requires less money, not more. The barrier isn't financial, it's psychological. It's the belief that you have to stay where you are, that you can't change course, that your identity is tied to your location. I've met people in this small town who moved from cities and found they needed far less than they thought. Not because they're wealthy, but because their needs genuinely decreased when they stepped out of environments that constantly stimulated desire and comparison. But more than money, what matters is the willingness to redefine success for yourself. To decide that success isn't about where you live, or what you have access to, or how impressive your life looks to others, but about how you feel when you wake up in the morning and how you feel when you go to sleep at night. Out here, success looks different. It's a good conversation with a neighbor where you both learn something. It's a morning walk where you notice things you've never seen before. It's an evening on the porch with nothing demanding your attention and feeling content rather than anxious about the lack of productivity. These might sound like small things, especially to people still in the achievement phase of life. But I've learned that small, genuine pleasures matter more than large, hollow achievements. That peace is more valuable than prestige. That being known by a few people who really see you matters more than being recognized by thousands who do on T. The move taught me something profound about the difference between a life that's full of things and a life that feels full. One spent years confusing the two. Access to restaurants, theaters, galleries, opportunities, all of that created a full calendar. But it didn't create a full life. Out here, with less access to everything, I feel more full, more present, more alive. The absence of constant options has revealed what I actually want and need, rather than just responding to what's available. There's also something important about being in a place with a slower rhythm. In cities, everything moves at the speed of now. Instant gratification, immediate responses, constant updates. Out here, things happen when they happen. People move at a human pace. Conversations unfold without rush. Projects take the time they take.
First, this drove me crazy.
I wanted things to happen faster, wanted people to move with more urgency. But gradually, I realized my urgency was just habit, not necessity. Most things don't actually require the speed I'd been applying to them. Slowing down didn't make me less effective. It made me more thoughtful. It gave me space to consider second and third order effects of decisions. It let me see patterns I'd been moving too fast to notice. Now, when I look out from my porch at the land around me, empty fields, distant tree lines, sky that goes on forever, I don't see absence or lack. I see space. Space to breathe, space to think, space to feel, space to simply exist without performing for anyone or proving anything. That space has become more valuable to me than anything the city offered. More valuable than convenience, than access, than being at the center of things. For those of you considering a change like this, here's what I wish someone had told me. Don't think about what you're leaving behind. Think about what you're moving toward. I didn't leave the city. I moved toward quiet, toward simplicity, toward a life that actually feels like mine, rather than one I'm performing for others or meeting expectations about. The question isn't whether you can afford to make a change. It's whether you can afford to spend your remaining years in an environment that no longer fits who you've become. Life is shorter than we think. The years ahead, however many they are, deserve to be lived in environments in ways that genuinely serve your well-being. It's not just maintain an image or follow a script. Share this with someone who might need permission to choose peace over prestige, quiet over constant stimulation. Have you ever felt the pull toward a simpler, quieter life? What's stopping you from exploring that possibility? Sometimes just naming what holds us back makes it smaller and more manageable.